Hi there, Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video, and welcome to episode 259 of Ask Boss Bounty. This is the weekly Q&A series that drops every Sunday, where I take your questions from the comments and do my best to answer them. So if you do have a question for next week's episode and you want to be featured in the video, be sure to leave that question in the comments section of this video. And as I said, hopefully your question will feature next week. If you do happen to enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you are new. And as this is episode 259, we can quickly talk about VC 59 in the line, which I do believe was non-Amor. Now, I do not have a carded or loose sample to show you, so I'll have to put one on the screen. And purely because this one is probably my least favorite figure in the whole line. I'm just not a fan of the look of the figure or the card back. It just screams Masters of the Universe to me, particularly Skeletor, and that's why I don't have it in my collection, but I'm sure loads of you out there have got it. I mean, I have owned it in the past, but I've since moved it on. I just don't have anywhere to display it. I wouldn't really know what to put it with, things like that. But yeah, that's VC 59. And with all that being said, let's get on to the first question. And the first question is from Marco Martinez, and I've got to say a huge thank you as well, because he's dropped a super thanks on the previous episode, and he says, Marco from the Bronx, USA here. Bossk's Bounty wants to send a thank you, as your question for next week's and reviews have been a traditional watch for my family. My question for next week, with Andor 2 coming out, what characters do you think Hasbro will give us from Season 2, as they usually start the figure process 12 months or more before? With great characters from Season 1 like Luthen, Saw Gerrera, Yularen, also Andor being the origin story for Rogue One, we need Baze and Bodhi. What are the chances of these characters being made in TVC? So those particular characters that you've mentioned there, I would say is a very slim chance of being made this year. You never know what's going to happen in the future, but certainly for this year, I highly doubt that any of those are going to be made personally, which is a bit of a shame, because all of those that you've mentioned there, I would love for them to make and to be in my collection. When it comes to Andor Season 2, I'm a little bit worried about it, what exactly we're going to get from Andor Season 2. I would suspect that we'll get something similar to what they've given the Black Series in terms of the main Andor character again, Cassian himself, in that sort of black outfit. I would suggest we'll probably get that. Maybe then a trooper or something. I just can't see them sort of putting too much of the budget towards Andor, unfortunately. But it's a big shame, because I'm a massive fan of the series, as you will know if you watch my videos. But we'll just have to wait and see what they do for that. We're certainly not going to get anywhere near, what the Black Series have got. And hopefully the series is a huge success and it really does link up to Rogue One, as we know it's going to do. And as you said, hopefully we'll get some of those characters from Rogue One that we are desperately missing. But I can't see that happening this year at all. It would be either be next year or the following year. So we're going to be made to wait for those, unfortunately. Jennifer H says, great discussion once again. Thanks. Question for next week. I passed on the various releases of 3.75-inch scaled Y-Wings, and it seems to have created a noticeable hole in my collection. Do you think Hasbro will ever release an updated mold or deco for another Y-Wing for those of us who passed on them? I know I can find one on the secondary market, but I would hate to drop cash on one, only to find out later that Hasbro is releasing a superior version. And if I would go to the secondary market, which Y-Wing version is your personal favourite? Thanks. So I would personally say that you're safe to go out and get a version of the Y-Wing. I can't really see Hasbro offering a new version just yet. And isn't the version that we've currently got still the mould that they used from back in the Kenner days? I'm pretty sure it is. And if it's not, it is very, very similar indeed. And having said that, I would probably look for possibly the 30th anniversary collection as being my favourite. I think that's the most accurate in terms of the colour scheme for A New Hope. But I've got to say, in general, the Y-Wing was never really one of my favourite ships anyway. And I've actually never owned one, both as a child or as an adult. Having said that, I did once own the Vintage Collection 1, but I never actually opened the box, so I don't really count that. But in terms of like a loose vehicle, I've never really had the Y-Wing in my collection. But just looking what's out there, I would suggest that the 30th anniversary is a pretty safe bet. The Vintage Collection 1 has red decals instead of yellow, so that wouldn't be accurate to Star Wars A New Hope, but it depends what you want to do. Robot Western says, hello BB, love your channel. Question for next week. I have a straight to the point question. If Hasbro said to you, Tim, we want you to choose the next TVC HasLab, what would your answer be? Oh man, that That is a difficult question because there is so many things that I would love them to do for a HasLab. You know, I've talked about the Imperial shuttle before. I've talked about Sandcrawler before. You know, an upscaled Republic gunship would be pretty cool. There are a lot of things that I feel that they could do for a HasLab, but I'm going to pick something that has never been made before. And that's kind of what these HasLabs almost should be about, right? They should be these dream projects that we never thought we'd get any other way. So I'm going to choose Luthen's ship. I think it's called the Hallcraft. I would go with that. I think it's a fantastic design as far as Star Wars ships go. It went through some action in the series in terms of coming up against the Empire, and I also feel that hopefully we might see more of it in Andor Season 2 as well. So that's probably what I would pick. It's something that I don't think they will do, but, you know, it would be awesome if they did. Barada73 says, Hasbro has done re-release waves in the past to save on tooling, so what if they regularly offer TVC waves that were made up of entirely re-released figures, but put them on Power of the Force style cards with coins, kind of like TVC's own version of the archive collection for Black Series? Of course, the coins themselves would require new tooling, but I can't see a metal disc with no paint apps adding too much to the costs. Plus, since Power of the Force was originally intended to span the entire Star Wars saga, the figures released on these cards wouldn't be limited to the OT. I think it would be a good way to keep some of TVC's best figures in circulation, and also the new card could give collectors who already own those figures a reason to buy them again. And who wouldn't want the VC-186 Boba Fett, VC-280 Darth Vader and VC-231 Stormtrooper on Power of the Force cards with coins? So that is certainly an idea of how they could reissue figures. It kind of goes along the lines of what they're doing now with the alt cards, doesn't it? Because a Power of the Force card would be an alt card as such with the coin. I've got to disagree a little bit though, because I personally wouldn't really want, you know, a Mandalorian, for example, on a Power of the Force card. I think the Power of the Force with coins need to be reserved first and foremost for the last 17, because we're missing a few of the last 17, and then perhaps some of the other characters that were released back in the day. When did those come out? 1985, I think it was, where, you know, you got like a Nikto or whatever on a Power of the Force card. That's how I would personally do it. As I said, I wouldn't really want to see you know, Cobb Vanth, for example, on a Power of the Force card. I just personally don't feel that that would work. I think they kind of need to keep that to the original trilogy, but that's just my opinion. You know, you may have a completely different opinion about that, but that's how I would do it anyway. Carl Wilson says, interesting show as always. Question for next week. My wish has been granted with the reveal of Carson Tava. Brilliant. Let's hope there's an X-Wing to follow. I'm turning my focus onto Pelimotto now, but I was thinking about a possible Rebels release. That was probably the most important appearance on the Ghost, Mon Mothma. What do you think, BB? Thanks, Carl. I've got to say that I feel that if Hasbro were to release Mon Mothma in the Vintage Collection, that they would either go with the Return of the Jedi version or the Andor version. I think the Andor version, purely because they've done that in the Black Series, I think, so that they could scale that figure down like they've done with many other figures. We could see them do that. But personally, I think I've said this before, and it was actually on my March Madness bracket as well. If they were to do Mon Mothma, I would like the one from Return of the Jedi first and foremost. But, you know, I love the Andor series as well, so I'd take that as well. You never know. They might be able to do a Rebels version as well and put it on a Rebels card. But me personally, I don't think that one's as important, even though we've got the Ghost, as the Andor or Return of the Jedi version. But again, just my opinion. Justin Riley says, question for next week. I was hugely surprised over the winner of this year's March Madness, and indeed I was also hugely surprised over the figures that made it past the initial stages. Same as last year, I'd never have guessed Pong Krell would make it to the number one. My question is, with this year's winner, did you have any inkling that Mara Jade would get to number one? Had you seen anything in any of the forums you host or are part of that Mara was such a popular character that she'd take pole position this year? Many thanks once again for your excellent content. I've got to be honest, that one for me surprised me. It certainly did, and I think it surprised quite a few other people as well. I think with these knockout competitions, it's often who you're up against, right? And I can't really remember the route to the final that she took, but often what happens is that, you know, if you're into the expanded universe and all your other sort of characters that you want from the expanded universe are out, they've been eliminated, then your vote shifts to the one that is, even if that character isn't necessarily something that you really want. You're almost supporting the media versus the character. What I would say as well is that the announcement of that, was it a 3-pack or 4-pack? I can't remember, with Joris in it. That certainly helped. I think that really impressed a lot of people, and they're really excited and happy that that is coming out into the Vintage Collection, and maybe that helped push Mara Jade along. But as I said, as the competition progresses, you know, other characters get eliminated, so, you know, sometimes your vote shifts around a fair bit. Through his film says, hey Bossk, not too much of a question, but I always wanted Hasbro to produce Director Krennic shuttle from Rogue One. Maybe it's not a very popular ship. Now with Andor series coming out, what are your thoughts? Yeah, as we know, Director Krennic is going to be in Andor Season 2, which is absolutely awesome, fantastic character. And you're right, his ship was very cool in Rogue One. I did like the design. And in fact, Lego made a set of it. I remember having that. I'm pretty sure I've still got it somewhere in storage. I just feel maybe it didn't really do enough in the film. Didn't have enough screen time for it to warrant a Vintage Collection release, seeing as, you know, we've got pretty small budgets in the Vintage Collection as it is. So I feel that they have to be quite choosy with the vehicles that they made, and that's probably why we don't have it. 1976, Zucker says, hi BB, great video as usual. Thanks. Question for next week. The USA have recently announced custom taxes on China's products. Do you think that this will badly impact the productions and the prices of all the toy lines made by Hasbro? Are the prices going to raise up for UK and Europe? Do you think that this will also lower the creations of new figures and toys in every line? Your thoughts? Thanks in advance for your answer. So this is a question that I've had a lot, both in the comments section and in my on my social medias and things like that. And unfortunately, it's not something that I know a huge amount about, you know, like world economics and things like that. It's just not something that really interests me. Of course, I'm interested from a toy point of view, and I was very interested to see what Big Bad Toy Store put out. And they've put out something that basically says that they reserve the right to increase prices when things get shipped, I believe, because they're having to pass on these tariffs to the consumer. Otherwise, they're just going to make no money at all, and it's just not, you know, worth them doing it. So my hope is that obviously a deal gets struck and all of this nonsense ends, and hopefully we can just get back to normal. In terms of prices for UK and Europe, now we do have Hasbro UK here. And again, and I don't really want to speculate whether Hasbro UK will have the same issues with the tariffs as their, you know, US arm will, because obviously it seems to be that tariffs are goods from China coming into the US, or is it US companies, regardless of where they are. As I said, I'm not really 100% sure about that, so we'll just have to wait and see. But in terms of, you know, the US, then I would just go and read what Big Bad Toy Store put out, and that'll give you an idea of sort of the pressure that retailers are going to be coming under with regards to these tariffs. And as I said, fingers crossed that a deal gets made and we can all go back to normal and get our toys. Wolf of Lear says, hey Bossk, with the recent arrival of the Streets of Mos Eisley playset, awesome as it is, it got me wondering, when are they going to release a classic Imperial hallway set? We could set up the Death Star escape scene or even a showdown between Ben and Vader. Do you think something like this might be on the cards for the 50th anniversary? I kind of suspect that we might have to wait until then for that, to be honest. It's not long since they released the other Imperial hallway playset, which is based on the light cruiser for Moff Gideon, wasn't it? You know, with that one, they're kind of sort of saying, you know, this is like Imperial hallways, but it's linked to the Mandalorian and it's all branded Mandalorian, so it is slightly different. And of course, it isn't what we really wanted. What we really wanted, as you say, is, you know, like proper Imperial walls from the Death Star, from the inside of a Star Destroyer, something like that. That would be pretty awesome. But I suspect we may have to wait, considering we've only just got the other one. SLA Dreams says, hey there Bossk, I've been watching and enjoying your videos for quite a while and love your reviews and thoughts on these figures. Question for next week, would you know why Hasbro doesn't include unlit sabers for Vintage Collection Ahsoka figures? I'm confused as to how all of the Jedi have unlit sabers except for Ahsoka. Even the forthcoming Asajj Ventress has 2 unlit sabers. Thanks for all you do. So I suspect it was probably a cost issue, but I really don't feel that that's a good enough excuse, because I really agree with you that this figure and all of the other Ahsokas should really have come with unlit lightsabers, because I really don't like displaying her with the sabers lit, to be honest, unless you're doing some kind of an action scene or whatever. But when I want to set this character up with my other, like, Rebels characters, for example, or the other characters that are in Ahsoka, I kind of want sort of like the sabers hanging down from her belt, which would look pretty cool. So it is a bit of a shame that they haven't done that for this or any other Ahsoka figures. But I guess, you know, the only reason I can give is a cost issue, but that is a bit of a lame excuse if that is the case, isn't it, really, considering, as you say, all other Jedi seem to have. So, you know, that was a bit of a shame, really. Collect says, great vid as always, BB. Hope you enjoy the great spring weather. With the great Imperial officer sculpts, do you think we will see generic officers in black or tech grey black cap coming soon, or more named characters? I know we got the builder pack, really hoping to see one checked off the 96 and to build up for a future bounty hunter scene and have Dane Jeer or a generic officer in black to fill that Tantive 4 scene. So yeah, when it comes to the officer that's dressed in black, I think they're called Stormtrooper officers, I think. Slightly different to the guys in grey, but also their belts are slightly different as well. If you look at the character you just mentioned there that's walking along with Darth Vader, he actually has some extra like silver pouches on his belt. So it wouldn't just be a case of putting out the officer sculpt that they've got now in black. Basically, they would have to retool that sort of torso belt section. Not all of the officers that are wearing black do have those belts, so it is a little bit confusing, but I'm pretty sure the ones in Return of the Jedi do, in the Andor bunker, for example, and that guy definitely does as well. It's something that I would like for them to do. Of course, you've got that General Veers card from the original 96 where you did get the officer dressed in black, but the card back is General Veers in his grey outfit, which is a little bit confusing. But, you know, if you want to truly complete the original 96, then yeah, you do need an officer dressed in black. I just don't feel it's as easy as, you know, just putting one of the ones that we already have out, you know, in black, basically. All right, then. So a couple of questions about Star Wars Celebration, and we've got Scott Layton. He says, hey, Tim, question for next week. For Celebration London 2023, Hasbro really put on a show. They showed us Taem, Velkan, and Tessek, and Pipeline, Grand Inquisitor, Grand Admiral Thrawn, Pre Vizsla, Director Krennic, and Darth Revan. Do you think we'll see anything to this scale for Celebration Japan 2025? And Steve DeBursa says, hi BB, with less than 2 weeks to go to Star Wars Celebration, are there any predictions you are hearing as to what may be covered for Vintage Collection, and if a HasLab update is on the cards for this event? Thanks as always, Steve. So first of all, Scott, yeah, you're absolutely right. Star Wars Celebration 2023 was awesome. We were there. It was fantastic. Lots of reveals. As you mentioned, quite a few pipelines as well. As we know, they've calmed down on the pipelines now, so perhaps we won't get any of those. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see, but we haven't had any for a while, have we? So that might not be a thing. So in terms of, you know, the sort of impact of what gets revealed might not be as great. But what I can say is that the reveals that I'm expecting at Celebration are going to be pretty awesome. I feel that we're going to get a good range of things. So things that are going to please quite a few different people out there. So perhaps something from the OT that's maybe Return to Tatooine inspired, and then also things from new media as well. I've just got a feeling that, you know, a few people will be quite happy with what's revealed. A fair amount of newness as well, I'm expecting as well. But, you know, in terms of pipelines to add to that, I'm really not sure. And in terms of a HasLab, I very much doubt that they'll reveal what it is at Celebration. They may suggest that there's going to be one and to start saving or whatever, just to sort of build up the hype. But I'm pretty certain that we'll have to wait until San Diego Comic-Con to actually see what that is and, you know, start backing it and whatever. Darth Zach says, hey Tim, I hope you and your family are having a nice weekend. Question for next week, do you expect Hasbro may hold anything back at Celebration in order to then reveal on May the 4th? I think we may not see the reveals of Han Solo, Chewbacca and Ben Kenobi until May. That, or maybe we'll see the reveal of next year's story. Thanks for everything you do for the community. So I suspect that we will get reveals on May the 4th. I can't really tell you how many we'll get, but I certainly think we'll get something. And I also can't tell you whether it will be the Han Solo and the Chewie. I suspect, once again, that they may be saved for San Diego Comic-Con, because I feel that those figures are going to be later on in the year anyway, in terms of, you know, when we actually get them, in terms of what wave they're in and things like that. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would hope that on May the 4th, we might get some Andor Season 2 stuff, because Andor will be running at that point, won't it? It starts at the end of April. We'll be right in the mix of Andor, so fingers crossed that we get a couple of reveals for that at least. But, you know, it's going to be an interesting few weeks, that is for sure. TL Campbell EFX says, hey Tim, what's your favourite scene or setting from a Star Wars movie? Cantina, Death Star, Bespin, etc. And does it coincide with your favourite of the films? This again is a really difficult question, because obviously the Star Wars universe is very rich in terms of its locations. It's very difficult to pick one. I do sway towards Andor because I'm a big fan of Return of the Jedi. So what you mentioned there is, does it coincide with my favourite film? But then saying that, I absolutely love, the escape from the Death Star from the original Star Wars film as well. And the whole thing with Ben Kenobi sneaking around the Death Star and, turning off the tractor beam and then facing Vader. So there's that as well. It's too difficult to choose, man, but I'll probably say, yeah, Andor or the Death Star. Nova Mura says, hi Tim, question for next week. With the HasLab Cantina due autumn winter this year, at what point do you think Hasbro would announce the release of some new aliens? What's your alien breakdown? What's the odds of Hasbro releasing the old figures you suggested? Dr. Evzan announcement was a surprise in the retro line. Would love a retro box of new aliens. Highly unlikely, but I can dream. Love the channel. Thanks, Scott. So yeah, in terms of the retro collection, I feel that one set that you've got for that year is it. You won't be seeing any more until next year, in my opinion. As for the vintage collection and more aliens, I doubt very much we'll see any from previous lines. I think the molds and the tooling for those is kind of gone, and Hasbro are quite nervous about what they reissue. You saw the criticism that they got for the Ponda Baba re-release, and even to some extent the Dr. Evzan as well. So I'm not even too sure if we're going to get too many aliens. We'll have to wait and see. I kind of feel that we'll get Greedo outside of the Cantina in some way on his original 96 card, but I don't even know if that's going to be this year either. But it would be nice to get more aliens, wouldn't it? But, at this moment in time, I've got sort of a bit of a mix going on with my Mos Eisley streets. I just cannot wait to get that Cantina to attach it all together and create an even bigger scene. I've been playing around with this thing since I got it, setting it up with original trilogy. Now I've got sort of Book of Boba Fett going on and things like that. So, all pretty cool. Can't wait for the Cantina. And come on, Hasbro, we need more aliens to fill it. All right then, guys, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave your questions in the comments section of this video for next week's episode. Hopefully your question will be featured. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters and channel members, as always, for the extra support. It is massively appreciated. And thank you all for watching, and we shall see you on the next one.